And we are live.
Woohoo!
Looking up top.
All right.
Our first in a short series about discussions, because discussions are really hard to do well and they often suck. But I think at least in our department, we're mostly agreed that when they're done well and they're designed carefully, discussions are still a really powerful tool for asynchronous classes and student engagement and authentic assessment. And they're worth doing if you have the right tools and the right design ideas surrounding them. Does that seem fair?
That sounds good. Yeah, so we're going to do a series of 3 tech talks about discussions.
No.
Is that where you were going to go?
Yep. I was going to
Okay.
hand it off to you because you're leading most of today.
All right. And so we are going to kick it off today just talking about some of the updates and new features that Canvas has added to their discussions. So Canvas is working on a discussions redesigner. They have been since about 2021. And right now, the redesign or the new features are not necessarily visible in everyone's courses. You have to turn them on, but they will be enforced in all Canvas shells by July of 2024. So I'm going to share my screen and we'll take a look at some of these new features today.
And I think we should briefly just emphasize that the difference between the discussions you're used to and the new design for discussions is not a big dramatic change. It's not like the difference between classic quizzes and new quizzes, where it's a whole new system that you have to learn. So I wouldn't want anybody to panic when they hear this will automatically turn on for everybody in July, whether you like it or not, because it's not that big of a deal.
Yeah, that's just Canvas's way of putting stuff out. They do like a soft open to it and then they make it an actual
soft open's a good term.
So that's what they're doing here as well. But
thank you for clarifying. Yep. So if you want to turn on some of these new features, you can go to settings, feature options, and then here discussion announcements redesign. You can go ahead and choose to enable it. So it's enabled in this course, and we'll just take a look at some of these features.
And whenever they enable that feature, any faculty member who does, it will automatically turn all discussions into the redesigned format, right?
Yes. Again, unlike new quizzes, you don't have to rebuild anything. All of your existing discussions just continue to work as intended.
Perfect.
With some additional feature options that we can go into.
Cool. All right. So we have some example discussions that we've created. And so we'll use these to point out some of these new features. So we're just going to run through a few of these. First one you may or may not notice is up here, roles are labeled now. So for example, it shows teacher role, or it'll show the role of a TA, or anyone who creates that discussion, it'll show that they're the author. And let's compare that to the traditional discussion is we don't see that role up here. So it just shows my name, does not show the role. But here we can see author and teacher. Pretty straightforward and simple. The next new thing is that we have an option to search discussions. So for example, I can type in a term here and it will highlight those terms throughout all the discussion posts. So really nice search feature.
Yeah. And it's not just like using Control F on your browser, because it will actually just highlight the posts and replies that include that search term. Yeah. And the rest of them are hidden while you have that search open.
Yeah. So it's a real nice, quick way to find what you need. We can filter now. So you can filter unread, all, or read. So if I click unread, no results, I've read them all. Okay. So I can go back to all of them. And then we can sort. So sort from newest to oldest, or oldest to newest.
Okay, so it'd be like if you scroll down, the first person to post isn't going to be the one at the top anymore.
Correct.
Just depending on how you've got that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. Thanks for clarifying that. Let's see. So another fun one is the ability to view history of someone's discussion. So as it stands, we can control whether or not students can edit their discussion posts. If students are allowed to edit their discussion posts, we can now view their edit history. So for example, we can see Nick made a few different posts. We can see version 1, version 2, and then the latest by simply just clicking on those, and it will show those latest posts. This was not something that was an option, or is not something that's an option in the current discussion tool. And let's just take a quick look at how we can turn on that edit history, or that, I'm sorry, that option to edit. So we could go through the discussions page. Settings. And then here, this is saying that it's checked, so students are allowed to edit and delete their own replies. If I uncheck that, that's not going to be the case. But when it's checked, it allows students a little bit more flexibility and freedom with their own posts. But as instructors, we can check what that edit history is.
And I think if you're going to change those settings, you might want to make it clear to your students how you have that set up. If your students are expecting to be able to edit a post and you don't have that turned on, that's going to be a nasty surprise for students. So you should probably clarify in your syllabus or an announcement or the discussion instructions or something. In this course, my discussions are set up so that you cannot edit after posting. So make sure you are happy with what you have before you hit post. Or alternatively, in this course, you are able to edit or delete your replies and posts after posting, but I'm able to see your edit history. So just be advised.
Yeah.
Well, and I guess you could
Great point.
structure a discussion board around that editing feature. Okay, we'll take a look at it later on.
Sure.
Edit your post for clarity or answer your own question. Like you could do something like that.
Yeah, I could imagine using it as part of your drafting system if you're doing iterations or revisions on a project or
maybe.
paper.
Yeah, I guess it just would depend on what the.
Yeah, I haven't really thought about that yet, but there's definitely some potential there.
Yeah, I like that. Cool. All right, moving on. So something else we can do is we can change the way we're viewing these threads. So right now, all of the responses are in line. So if I were to scroll down here, this test student made a post. We can look at the replies. If I look at those replies, they're directly below that post. So they're in line.
And hidden until you click on it.
Yes,
Gotcha.
thank you. However, I can view it in split screen. So let's see what that looks like differently now. So if I scroll down, here's again, my test student post. I want to view those replies. And now that the replies open on that panel on the side of my screen. So just another viewing option.
And students would be able to do this as well. This isn't just for the instructor. Students can do the sorting, the finding, and
Yeah, great point. Let's look at that in student view. All right, yep. So in student view, we still have our search, our filters, our sorting, and these different views.
Gotcha. Great.
Cool.
Personally, I don't like the split screen very much, so I would probably stick to the traditional view. But
Yeah,
it's nice that, but you get the choice.
Yeah.
Choose which one you prefer.
Oh, and I see we have chat from Jennifer. Would be nice to see when students post a single letter to view other posts before they submit their original.
Oh, sure. So if you have the setting checked off
Mhm.
of must post, or you can see other student replies. If you have students that are gaming that by just typing nonsense and then seeing whatever everyone wrote and then editing the post to be in line with other people, this would be a way to make sure that students are not doing that.
Yeah.
Or catching them if they do it.
Yeah, I think that view edit feature is really nice. Something that I think is a pretty cool new feature is the ability to mention somebody in a post.
Mhm.
So, for example, I'll show you a mention, what it looks like. Oop, I want to go out of this threaded or the split screen view. Okay, so I'm going to come back down here. I'm going to check out these replies and they're going to load.
Oh, no, it's
Okay, they're not going to load.
Let's try that again.
Okay, we'll try again. All right, So
students taking as much bandwidth as it can.
Skitch the Bigfoot mentioned Nick in his reply. And so it's really easy to do that. You can simply mention somebody if you click reply. We then can hit the @ symbol, and then it will show everyone in the course. So all the students in the course and the instructors. And so you can tag that person you want to mention. You can include them in your reply. And when you reply, that person will receive a notification in their inbox or in their email that they were mentioned in a post with a link to get to that post where they were mentioned.
So that's a new notification setting in everybody's profile settings. And we checked and it is enabled by default. So by default, students should get those notifications when they are mentioned by someone else.
And I guess it should also, as we talk about mentioning, we should mention that this works for announcements too. The discussion redesign and the announcement redesign are overlapped. So you'll also, if you create an announcement, you would be able to add certain individuals in the course, and students would be able to do that as well.
Ooh, I like that, because one thing that I like to do in my course is when I do weekly announcements, sometimes my class is mostly discussion based. And sometimes I like to point out really great discussion contributions that students have made in the previous week. And I could at them and say, Melanie last week had this really great point about such and such. And I really appreciated that she said that, because it leads into our next week's content or something like that. And the mentioning tool is kind of a nice little way of making that a little bit cooler. And then you get the notification.
Yeah.
Oh, I got mentioned. And I'm going to actually go read the announcement because I wasn't going to read it otherwise, but now I will. And I see that I got some praise, and that's really nice and engaging.
Yeah.
And you could do that too with questions, like maybe you've got a hybrid course, something was asked in lab. I'm going to add Caleb because I need to answer that question. Hey, remember Caleb had this question in lab.
Yep.
Here's me answering it now.
Yeah.
I notify him, and then the announcement also just gets sent to everybody as well.
Yeah,
So that would be an option.
Yeah, I really love this for community building.
And then something else that we were discussing earlier today was you could, so like when you're,
Jennifer has some good comments here. Yeah, so Jennifer mentions that she has seen the mention option, which is cool. And then, yeah, double down on viewing of announcements. Right?
Yeah, so just mention every single student at the end and they'll all get the announcement. Yeah, that might not be a bad idea sometimes. But one thing we were talking about as a potential use case for this was popcorn discussions. Like when you're in a physical on-ground classroom, you can do this activity where, Nick, I'm going to ask you a question. You need to answer it, and then you need to tag somebody else and say, Melanie, you're it. Now you answer it. Caleb, you're it. Now you answer it. And you popcorn back and forth in the room to have this discussion. And it can be done as an icebreaker. It can be done as a debate or any kind of discussion you want. That's one way you can make them a little bit more engaging and make sure that everybody is included. With mentions, you could do that in a Canvas discussion as well, where that's part of the instructions is first person to post, answer these questions, and then at one of your peers that hasn't already posted, and then they get to post next. And you could structure it in a way that would be kind of a cool way of doing that.
Yeah, that'd be a fun idea.
Well, I like that when you do the @ symbol, it gives you a drop down list. Like it's not like I have to know Caleb's name. I can just scroll through the list and find it.
And if the instructions were tag somebody who hasn't already posted, what that does is it makes you read all the replies to see who's already posted.
Good point.
And you're kind of sneaking in a little bit of enforcement of, oh, you actually have to read what people are saying.
Yeah. Cool. So yeah, I think there's a lot of good use for that one. I really like that new feature. Another new one is the ability to quote somebody's posts or replies. So if I want to reply to test student, I can click this and I can quote that reply. So when I select that, it's going to include that original reply within my response. So if I reply to that one, there it is. So it's showing that here's the original quote. I can expand that and read the full thing, and then whatever I type is there below that.
Interesting.
Yeah, so that's a new one. Let's see. What else?
Recording?
Yes, and that's, yep, one other feature. And again, this can be turned on and off within the settings. But if a student reads a post and they feel like there's something inappropriate about it, they can go ahead and report that post, and they can choose their reason, submit that, and then what will happen is the instructor. Okay, let's move that. Okay, the instructor will see that it's been reported.
Does the instructor get a notification or an email about that?
You know, that's a good question. I don't know the answer to that. We can see if there's a notification for that, but the instructor sees it. I'm in student view. The other students won't necessarily see that it's been reported.
Right.
But it will be, so if a student has already done it, it's typically turned off once it's been reported once. Let's see.
I thought it tallied, right? Like it'll tally.
Oh, does it?
Different warnings. And then an instructor can make a decision about what to do with
So
it.
See,
for that individual.
it's, yeah, that report, that, so they won't, yeah, exactly.
Okay, I see.
But the instructor will see that it has been reported too. So that's another feature. And then a new one that is sort of, we'll open a different discussion to take a look at it, unless you guys had more comments on this discussion. So I was going to move on to the anonymous.
Oh yeah, let's go
Should we
there
take a
while
look
we
at
have
that?
time.
Yeah.
We'll have 3 of these sessions and we'll talk a little bit more about like how you implement that kind of stuff in the next couple, but we're only teasing that right now.
So we have a new example discussion to show another feature, which is that now we can have anonymous discussions or partially anonymous discussions. This will open up. We'll take a look at it. And so Nick built this discussion and he chose to make it partially anonymous. And so students will get this notification. When creating a reply, students will have the option to show their name and profile picture or remain anonymous. Your name and profile picture will be visible to all course members. So he made it partially anonymous. If he made it fully anonymous, students would not have that option.
Can you show really
Yes.
quickly how that looks on the editor?
Yes, let's see. So where we create these.
So you've jumped into the discussion board, you're building it from the start. You'll see there's an option for anonymous discussions. If you have the discussion redesign turned on, you'll notice that in this view, we're editing the existing discussion. We can't adjust it once it's been turned anonymous.
You can't de-anonymize it once it's
No.
been made anonymous.
No, and another element is you'll notice that graded is unchecked. That's the other element. If it's anonymous, Canvas makes it really anonymous. Like you can't go through and see who's done what after the fact. You can't, again, de-anonymize it to be able to grade it. So it's kind of like if it's anonymous, it's not going to let you kind of do that, that kind of discussion board.
And let me ask you this, correct me if I'm wrong. In my experience, I was able to only set it to be anonymous from the discussions page when creating a new discussion. Were you able to do it by adding a new discussion to a module?
No, that's right. You told me about that. So that's another thing to consider is that when building this, you need access to the full discussion editor. If you remember, like you're in the modules, you're adding a new page, adding a new assignment, adding a new discussion from there.
It doesn't have that.
It creates that placeholder and doesn't actually dive you into the editing features of it. So that's where you're just going to have to go through the discussions tool for that.
Yeah, so here in the discussion tool, now I have that option. All right, we'll go back to your.
Yeah, no, thanks. I just wanted to kind of see what that'll look like.
Yeah. And so let's go back and look at the original discussion. And we were talking about use cases for anonymous discussions, and I really like this use case that Nick came up with. You want to kind of explain?
Yeah, because again, it's once it becomes anonymous, it can't be graded. So we're trying to think of like what's something that would make sense to be ungraded, but also makes sense to be anonymous. And we had this idea that you'd like maybe brainstorm for an upcoming session. Here are the questions I have. Caleb brought up an artifact from like Quality Matters where you talk about the muddiest point, essentially allowing students to be protected behind the anonymous settings to be able to fully articulate the things that they're struggling with or
Ask the
anxious
questions
about.
you're embarrassed to ask out loud.
Exactly. And because this one is partial, students would be able to not anonymize themselves if they wanted to.
Yeah.
They can select that. When it's fully anonymous, it's just by default that way. And another thing to note about that interaction is that a faculty member will never be anonymous in one of these places. But we do have a workaround if you want to create kind of like rogue or stealth anonymous, I guess, students. We'll talk about that in just a sec.
So I'm in student mode and I clicked to reply just so we can see what it looks like from a student's perspective. So in this option where it's partially anonymous, now I can choose as the student if I want to post as anonymous or as myself, which in this case is the test student. And so let's see if we post that. And now we can see this one is not anonymous because we made that choice.
So we have a couple things in the chat.
Yeah, let's take a look at the chat. All right.
So yeah, if just to reiterate what Jennifer's asking, if
Mhm.
if a discussion is set to anonymous or partially anonymous, it isn't a gradable assignment at that point. You can't use SpeedGrader on it. It doesn't connect to the gradebook. It would be an ungraded discussion board. So that does limit its use case in some ways. But I think this brainstorming and this question asking thing is a great way to do it. Maybe a feedback forum would be another option. Something like that where you want students to have the option, the ability to comment or ask questions in a safe, anonymous way, but it's not going to be a graded assignment.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And I think Nicole was asking if it defaults to being off. I think that's in response to what we're talking about with anonymous discussion boards. It does. It will always default to off unless, again, in the editor you switch that.
Yeah.
You can still have you still have all the controls as the instructor. You can delete anonymous responses again if there is, an issue with somebody taking advantage of that anonymity and saying something that doesn't have to do with the curriculum or the material being discussed. You can still delete those. For example, I deleted one where I accidentally wrote the wrong thing, or I can't remember what I flubbed it. So I just deleted that, and students will see that, but they won't be able to see the history of it. But one of the things I wanted to note, though, about the anonymous, I mentioned that as an instructor, you can't be anonymous. But say you want to seed an anonymous discussion board to show students that there's interaction in there, or to we're brainstorming for an upcoming session. What questions do you have? What areas were you really confused about? You could put your own ideas in there if you wanted to, using the test student account, because the test student can be anonymous and students won't know it's the test student. You can kind of embed those materials in that way. So if I had a question students often get in a certain unit, and I'm using this kind of style of discussion board, I can use the test student to kind of slide those in.
So you just go into student view and then you post in an anonymous discussion and make sure it's set to anonymous.
Yep, exactly.
Cool. So those are the features. Those are the new.
And it's almost 1:30.
Yeah.
So we made it through. Well, that's great. If we have any questions, or if anybody's tried any of these tools and has some experience with them, or if this is triggering any ideas in your brain that you're excited about and maybe want to share and talk about, we could absolutely do that. And if not, that's okay too, because we have 2 more weeks of discussion-based tech talks where we'll talk about some best practices and some design ideas and some example discussion activities, just to kind of get your gears turning on making discussions that are not terrible.
Melanie, do you want to put our feedback form in while we're kind of letting people think? And
Yes, good idea.
If you haven't left yet, hang on for just a second.
Let's see, I can grab that really quickly.
One of these days we'll remember this and not have to scramble at the end.
That's okay. So while Melanie's doing that, though,
any
any initial thoughts? Are you saying thank you for the overview? Laura's saying, looking forward to more. Hopefully we can kind of keep building upon this. I think the momentum's there. A lot of people are doing discussion boards. I would say I haven't seen a course that really doesn't.
Lots of instructors use discussion boards, but I think most instructors are not happy with them. They're not usually very happy with the outcomes, with the level of engagement. And I think usually students feel like discussions are busy work. It's really hard to think of something to reply to 2 or 3 of your peers just to get it done with so you can get the grade. So hopefully we can talk about some ideas of getting beyond that and designing discussions that are more productive and interactive and don't feel like busy work. So
absolutely,
come back next week for that.
Well, and Heidi just mentioned rubrics for discussion boards. I think that's important for how you structure. Depending on the discussion board.
Absolutely.
You might want to spec it out, like what exactly our students need to be doing.
That's a
having
good
those
note.
levels of transparency.
Yeah, we'll
so
make
we'll
sure
make
we
sure that we
cover
discuss that.
Yeah,
sure.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, I have a grading rubric that I use for my discussions, and it saves a ton of time, and it increases the transparency of what students are being graded for, so they know what I'm asking of them. Yeah, we can definitely include that next week or the following week. Otherwise, thanks for coming, and we will see you next time.
Thanks, everyone.
I'm gonna end the live.
No, thank you, and please send us any of your questions if you have them.